We are going to make some acai ganache macarons, but before we get to the ganache, I really quickly wanted to show you just a really small, brief glimpse at how I made my macaron shells, mostly for the color. I used my basic French meringue macaron shell recipe here, which you can find in several of my YouTube videos, plus a really in-depth tutorial with video tutorial on my website as well, my macaron shells ebook. And the recipe is in all of my other macaron ebooks as well if you are looking for it. So I am adding in two colors here, violet and French blue, into the egg whites for my French meringue here before I add in my sugar and cream of tartar. You don't have to use these exact same colors, but when I was thinking about acai and the color that I thought my ganache would end up, I really wanted a color that was a mix between blue and purple, and I wanted it to be really vibrant, but I didn't want it to be a really typical purple, so I didn't want to just use one of those colors, and I thought that this would be a really good mix together. Now, after I got my meringue whipped up to a really nice stiff peak and I started adding in my dry ingredients, the powdered sugar and almond flour, I decided I wanted it a bit more blue, so I added in a little bit of a royal blue gel food colorant, and then I was really happy with the color that came out in different light, and it's a little bit hard to tell from the filming I did with my phone and the pictures I took with my camera, but even in person, truly in different lighting, it looks more blue and more purple, and I was so happy with how it turns out. And you can kind of tell, depending on the angle and the lighting in my camera, you get these different hints of different colors. It was really great. So after I pipe these, tap the tray, rest them, get them into my oven, bake them off, then we're gonna get into the acai ganache. All right, we're gonna make a pastry cream style ganache here. It's a bit more challenging than a basic ganache, but I really love the flavor and texture, and it is a little bit less sweet than a normal ganache, so it's great for this flavor as well. I am using a mix of both white chocolate and raspberry inspiration chocolate for the chocolate portion. And then for the liquid, most of what I'm using is acai. And then I have a little bit of cream, sugar, a bit more cream, and cornstarch. Now, you don't have to use the raspberry inspiration chocolate, but acai, while it definitely has a berry flavor, it's very similar to something like blackberry or blueberry in that if it's not fresh, it can be a little bit hard to get the precise flavor of it. So the raspberry chocolate is just going to help enhance the acai flavor in the ganache and help us really feel that and help it overcome the white chocolate and cream and cornstarch. The acai and sugar in my saucepan, I'm just heating up to a scald. Then I'm going to temper that over the cream and cornstarch in this small bowl before transferring back into the saucepan. Now, this is cooked just like any pastry cream. So if you've made a pastry cream before or any kind of custard, you will already know exactly what to do. Any kind of pastry cream, ganache, or otherwise, you really want to monitor a couple things. One, do not ever crank up the heat. You do not want to overheat the ganache. So even if it takes a bit more time, go lower and slower. Cook this maximum on medium heat, but I really recommend medium low or even low heat, and just stand there, continuously whisk this mixture until it thickens and just barely begins to bubble from the bottom of the pan. You'll see these really thick bubbles, again, just like any pastry cream. Once you see those bubbles, immediately remove it from the heat and set it to the side. You saw that I melted my chocolates in the microwave before I started this process. If you want to partially melt those chocolates after you pull the pastry cream mixture from the heat, that is okay as well. If you want to give the cream mixture a few seconds to cool down before you pour it over those chocolates. So while I'm just whisking here, I wanted to talk a little bit more about why I chose acai for a ganache, especially considering the flavor profile and that it is one of those challenging flavors to really get a strong, intense taste of, similar to something like a blackberry or a blueberry. First of all, I really love creating themed sets of macarons, and I've been thinking a lot about different kinds of berry or fruit sets of macarons. I've been thinking a lot about other themes that are like spa day or like self-care or brunch or breakfast and all of these different things. And a lot of them I thought some kind of acai, ganache, or macaron could be so fun to add into those themes. And then also acai is something I see in the freezer aisle of my grocery store all the time. So I felt like it was something accessible, and you don't need to puree acai if you already see it like made for a smoothie bowl or something. So it's pretty easy to use. So as you can see here, that acai pastry cream mixture thickened up really intensely. I removed it from the heat and I'm pouring it over the partially melted chocolates. I just let that sit on my counter for a minute or two. The heat from the pastry cream mixture will absorb into the chocolates and help them to finish melting. Then I like to get in there and stir everything together just pretty gently. Usually I just use a spoon. You can use a spatula or whatever you want. But then after all of the chocolate is thoroughly combined into the pastry cream mixture, then you just need to leave it alone. This needs to cool down a bit before we emulsify it and before we emulsify in the butter. It might look a little bit oily or greasy at this point. That is not anything you should be too worried about. But after letting it sit for 16 to 20 minutes, depending on kind of the temperature of your kitchen, as you begin emulsifying it, you should see it come together. If it is not coming together and if your ganache still looks oily at this point or after you add in the butter, the chances are it probably got overcooked either at too long or at too high of a temperature, or something was wrong temperature-wise with the chocolate and the ganache. So after this is completely emulsified, right now it's warm, it's just above room temperature, but it's not hot, it's not cold. Now I'm going to start emulsifying in my butter, which of course is room temperature and unsalted. And now I'll just emulsify this in with my immersion blender, one piece at a time. This is a ganache that I really do not recommend making if you do not have an immersion blender. It's possible if you use a whisk and you whisk it really well, especially if you have that perfect temperature and the butter can incorporate in still, it's not too cold. But whereas a simpler ganache that is just chocolate and cream and usually a bit of butter or trimoline or something like that, those ganaches are a lot easier, even if they're, I think, better if you emulsify them. It's possible to just use a whisk, but this ganache, really the texture is best if you emulsify them with an immersion blender. I am pouring my finished ganache into a plastic wrap lined sheet pan, though of course you can use any other container you want. Just make sure to cover the ganache on contact with plastic wrap as it cools at room temperature. Otherwise, this ganache would be okay if you set it in the refrigerator for a couple hours or overnight. Though, like any ganache, it is better to use it sooner. If the longer it stays in the refrigerator, the higher chance you run that you might need to rewarm it and re-emulsify it to have the best texture. So after it is completely cooled, usually just a couple hours at room temperature should suffice. You can go ahead and pipe it into your macaron shells. And look at these colors. I love it. I didn't add any colorant into the acai ganache. Between the acai itself and then the little bit of raspberry chocolate, we have this gorgeous deep purple ganache, and then it is complemented so well by the blue purple macaron shells. Again, my camera and phone had a little bit of a hard time picking up exactly how blue purple this is. In this lighting, it looks much more blue. In person it was a little bit more purple than this, but still really great. It has definitely an acai flavor, and it is definitely overwhelmingly fruity without being too sweet. And again, such a perfect macaron to add into so many summer or fruit, brunch, all these different kinds of themed macarons. That's something I really hope you give a try, especially if you are like me and you've been seeing acai in the freezer aisle of your grocery store and have been wanting to give it a try in some of your pastries. I think this is your sign to do so. Thank you so much for being here, watching my video. I really appreciate all of your support here and on all of my social media and other channels. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.